Hey friends, so hopefully you're doing well. I uploaded another video. This time it's between Nick Diercks and myself. Nick, he's a good friend of mine. I partner with him in ministry, and it's been a privilege and honor to do that with him. I've learned a lot from this guy, and I couldn't wait to interview him. And thankfully, he made time for me. And if you're interested in hearing these kind of discussions, as early as possible, I first upload these discussions in parts on my podcast. So search for Saints Edified on iTunes or any platform that you use, and you could definitely find us on there. That's where I upload these interviews and these lessons first. But for your convenience, I go ahead and I compile the audio clips and I make one large video here on YouTube for you guys. So that way it's easier for you guys to share and go back to, and even leave comments if you guys want. So Nick, he's a good friend of mine and he's very knowledgeable in the Prolife ministry. If you have any questions for Nick or for anyone in Arks of Bulrushes ministry, feel free to go to their Facebook page, like their page, and you can leave a message or a comment, and they'll more than likely respond pretty fast. These brothers and sisters are so knowledgeable when it comes to the pro-life ministry. I've been learning so much from them. So, and this is the reason why I wanted to record a discussion and share with the listeners, and also with others who probably will never even know about. I just know that these discussions are there's just so much goodness in them that I want other Christians to know about. So please share this video with friends and family. And once again, I encourage you just to take notes in this discussion. He does go over a lot. Eventually, we'll have some links and some resources that we could add to the description. But for now, just go ahead and listen, and hopefully you enjoy. All right, Nick. So thanks, man, for joining me today on the Saints Edified podcast. You go to Sovereign Grace. I used to go there. We kept getting interrupted. It was on my birthday, and I kept trying to ask you about your testimony, and kids were coming up to me. The ladies were wanting us to eat right away. So I got bits and pieces of your testimony, but I never really heard the full thing. The full thing, and I just remember being very impressed. So do you mind sharing with us like how God saved you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess we start at the beginning. I mean, being raised, I wasn't necessarily raised like in a Christian home. My parents would go to church occasionally, that type of thing. I would go to Sunday schools, a little bit here and there. Nothing that I remember really. Then getting into like teenage years and stuff. I mean, really, once my parents split when I was in elementary school, like all that, for the most part, kind of died down. There wasn't any type of like regular going to church or anything like that. And then getting into like my teenage years, I did the thing that teenagers do, maybe the heathen that I was. But anyways, and then occasionally I'd go to get invited by a friend, hey, come to like this Wednesday Bible study. I don't know what they call the Wednesday ones, but it was, usually the teenage kids
Like youth
meeting
group?
at a high school. Yeah, youth group.
Okay,
There we
okay,
go.
all right.
I don't know why that slipped my mind. But anyways, I remember going to those, but all those times. Well, so I'll continue even from there. Then like into early like 20s and stuff like that. I would kind of go back every once in a while, type of thing. But all those times was just like it was like purely therapeutic. There was nothing else to it. I only went because it just made me feel good to be around happy people, right? I mean, that was all it did. There was I wasn't grasping onto the gospel or anything like that. So that was in my 20s, and then going farther in, then I get married, start a career, all those things, have kids, get to my mid 30s, and there's issues like things start happening in life that are a result of just being a sinful person, a depraved person. I wasn't necessarily like I wasn't going like committing like heinous sins or something like
Right.
against like anyone or anything like that, but we just things like selfishness and pride get in the way, especially in a marriage. And started having issues in marriage and stuff like that. And it was something I held on to really closely, just because my growing up in a broken home, I didn't want my kids growing up in that. And so like that shocked me when I started realizing that. So then I went through. So then I just started working on the marriage a lot and everything, and things seemed to be just going fine. But the thing that I couldn't shake that kept getting me was like every night when I go to bed, I was so just distraught about things. I would start thinking about, just I guess, what life was about and stuff, and I would just start having these thoughts, and I would always end up at the end of this just like terrified before I went to sleep at night, because I would just think about, like, I would get to this point where it was just emptiness, and it was like, there was nobody there, just me, and it was just tormenting, and I was like, and then one night I sat there and I was just out of nowhere, I just started praying. That was something I never did. I didn't do those types of things, but it was like I was at the end of this line, and I didn't know what else to do except to turn to this God that I had off and on heard about, my whole life, and but I never really took that to heart, everything I'd ever learned about him. And so I just started praying, and I guess, it wasn't like everything just got better, but there was peace in a way. I started praying. I opened the Bible for like the first time in my life, and started just reading the Word. Yeah. And when this is all happening, it's not, I'm not thinking about like, hey, what's going on? I'm just thinking,
this is regeneration.
Hey, yeah, you know what? I'm doing something good here. I'm going the right way, and then about after a month of doing that, this is like December of 2014. About a month of doing that, I started talking to my wife about it. She tells me that she'd been doing the same thing.
That's crazy.
And I was blown away. I was like, are you kidding? She's like, no. She's like, I've been reading the Bible too. I was like, and we were like, we just kind of looked at each other and we're like, what's going on? And we're like, so what do we do? Do we go to church? It was like, that was kind of the discussion. It was, it seems really weird, but we had no idea.
Well,
so we picked a church down the street, started going. And then within about 3 months, I started, met some people there, some friends I ended up making that were into like, kind of into apologetics and evangelism and stuff. And I was like, okay, this is cool. So then these friends, like I started talking to them, then like out of the blue one day, as any good Calvinist friend does, they bring up Calvinism. And I'm like, I don't even know what that is. What is that? And they're like, well, read all these things. Look at, read John 6, read, just
Romans 9.
Read Romans 9, read all these things. And like, this is like I said, I'm like 4 to 6 months into like having even started reading any, I honestly hadn't been like indoctrinated in like any type of Armenian thought or whatever else you would say, even dispensational, right?
Right.
It's all popular stuff, but.
Right. You weren't aware of all that. So.
I wasn't even aware. So these people, so my friends show it to me, and it's pretty easy. I was like, all right, that makes sense. Started moving on. Anyways.
That's funny.
So then I look back now, and it's like all providence, right?
Right.
I mean, we know it is, but when it's, at the time when it's happening, I mean, how would I know? I mean, if I, the night I first started praying to God, if my prayer said, wow, God, your providence is just wonderful. You reached into my life and changed me, right? That'd be absolutely.
But I mean, honestly, man, but what you said is true, though. I mean, it's because you weren't really familiar with what's taught in most churches. Your testimony aligns so closely with what we believe about Calvinism,
Right.
And no, I mean, you were broken and realized you can't do anything, so you turned to God,
Right. Yeah.
And He saved you, and then it changed your mind, your heart. I mean, man, that's amazing, bro.
Yeah.
So and your wife too. You said your wife also.
Yeah.
Both of you guys around the same time.
Yeah.
That's just crazy,
absolutely.
man. That's just
what a blessing that was.
Yeah.
Man, because I mean, having a marriage with where you're married to, a sister in Christ, like you can't, like, that's amazing, right? I mean, I don't know what it would be like, but I imagine it's difficult. I mean, I've known people that are, married to like unbelievers. I know the struggles they go through, and
yes, exactly, man. I mean, it's just cool though, bro. It's cool. I'm glad you shared that. We'll get into the whole pro-life thing in a little bit. One thing that it's funny, the first time when I was out there with you, maybe the second time, we were talking about like, pro-choice arguments. And someone was like, you told me that someone told you like, oh, well, you guys aren't educated in biology to even talk about these things. And you said, okay, well, if I had a degree in biology, would you listen to me?
Yeah.
And he said, yeah. Okay, well, I have a degree in biology, and after when you first said that, I thought you were just being funny. But then afterwards, no, you actually do. You actually went to school and you have a degree in biology.
Yeah.
So did you pick biology before you became a Christian? So like out of all things you could have been educated on, why'd you pick biology?
Yeah, well, absolutely before I was a Christian.
Okay.
We're talking 10, 12 years before I was saved. Yeah, dude. So that story that you're talking about was a Facebook post, and
Okay.
this guy was on there ranting about how the unborn child is the same as cancer,
Right.
or it was like cancer, whatever he said, right? Similar to cancer. And so I challenged him on it, and then other people started challenging. As he started being faced with more good arguments against him, he turned to, well, I'm just not going to believe any of you guys because none of you are biologists. And I asked him, I said, so you'd believe someone if they were a biologist? Well, yeah. I said, well, I have a biology degree. And I said, I have a biology degree, and in all my arguments that I've presented against you, I can show you without a doubt that the unborn is not cancer. And then
Oh, man.
and then he goes, well, that doesn't mean what I'm saying though is I'm not saying the unborn is cancer. I'm saying the unborn is like and then cancer, and then like it just and then he changed the whole thing, and then
Yeah.
he said then he went into utilitarianism and all that, and I was like, I stopped talking at that point. I don't do Facebook debates really. It's
Yeah,
not my
no,
thing,
but it's just funny because you know, I mean, the fact that you do have a biology degree, but it's interesting though, you know, because especially those who are pro-life, who are out there with science and everything, they see us as the most like uneducated people and sexist and you know medieval
yeah.
minded, you know, and
Yeah.
and you know, so and maybe that's for a different talk, you know, because I do want to actually dive because we talked a little bit about it, and I think it'll be very helpful to share a little bit, but maybe not today. You know, just your mindset before, you know, when it came to biology, evolution, God, they're very helpful. But it's just cool to know that especially when we're out there and someone brings that up, you know,
Yeah.
I could bring you over. Hey, well, if you want to talk to a biologist or someone who has a degree in biology,
Absolutely.
you know, so it's just pretty neat that they actually do have a degree in that, and I mean, and I'm sure it helps.
Dude, it does.
It helps.
We've used it out on the sidewalk multiple times, basically, because I mean, I did microbiology, all those things, genetics. You know, I took a
Nice.
lot of genetics classes, microbiology, including in microbiology. You get into and genetics, but all those things you get into, you cover like embryology and stuff like
Yeah.
that.
Right.
And so I've been able to articulate pretty clearly, I feel, to
Nice.
people, you know, how biologically, you know, the unborn is a separate, distinct human being.
That's cool.
It's come across. It helps, man,
Yeah.
because there's people that, you know, that don't know those things necessarily.
I think it's more of a cop out. I mean, and I think it is. I'm not saying that just to throw jabs at them, but it's more of a cop out. You know, I mean, imagine like if we talk to atheists the same way who question the Bible. Oh, well, you guys don't have a master's in divinity, so why should we listen to you? You know, like
Right, yeah.
we never use that on them. You know, and
Yeah.
and when someone has a question about the Bible, we'll more than likely answer it. You hear atheists talk about these things. Very few times they get it right, but a lot of times they don't, and we don't use that same card on them. You know, like, oh, well, you don't have a degree in theology, so
Right,
you
yeah.
shouldn't be talking about this. You know, and now, as I mentioned already, Arks of Bulrushes. That's where I met you. I met you through Ben and Anne-Marie's, which at a later time they will be interviewed as well. And I think all three of you have just great insight on this movement. It's called Arks of Bulrushes. It's on Facebook. You know, right?
Yeah,
Anything
we have a
else?
Facebook page. Working on a website. It's not
Okay.
there yet, but definitely a Facebook page. So yeah, just Arks of Bulrushes should come up. And I guess at the end we can talk. But
Yeah.
we have an email address. That's about it.
Yeah, no,
But we want people to contact us for sure.
no, we definitely want to make a website or something, you know, and I think I agree to help you guys out on that too. So one more thing before we start focusing on pro-life arguments and all that, you know, you've only been a Christian now for almost 6 years, but you were immediately drawn to pro-life ministry, and
Yeah.
and I just find it interesting because when I first became a Christian, I wasn't thinking about going to, you know, these abortion clinics or anything like that. It wasn't
Yeah.
until way later where I realized there was such a problem. So just quickly, how did you like what drew you to pro-life ministry? You know, like how did that start?
Yeah, for sure. Well, I mentioned that I got kind of turned on to Calvinism by my friends, you know, early on and stuff. So part of that included friends like and evangelism. So I started going on YouTube, right? Like one of the first things I found, you know, you find like Living Waters, you know, Ray
Right,
Comfort
yeah.
and stuff. So start watching those. They start, you know, what I mean, then you start seeing that they hit on pro-life stuff in there, you
Yeah,
know,
they
a
do.
little bit. And then So then I started talking to my friends about what I was watching, and one of my friends goes, "You need to look up Jeff Durbin." I'm like, okay. This wasn't about a pro-life thing. This was about Calvinism, right?
Yeah,
and
yeah,
stuff
yeah.
like that. He's
Yeah.
like, you need to look up Jeff Durbin in Apologia. Okay, I'll do that. That'd be cool. So I look it up, and like, so I started watching those, listening to Apologia and stuff, and then following them on Facebook, and then you start seeing they're making videos of them out in front of abortion clinics.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And I'm like, and it just like I think the first video I saw like just lit a fire. It was like, yes. And this is like 6 months into being a Christian.
Nice.
So I was like, that just lit me up, dude. I was like,
yeah.
I was like, oh my gosh, like I need to be doing that
That's
like
cool.
immediately, you know. So this fire started, and I started studying, you know, about abortion because I didn't know anything about it,
Right.
you know, at that point. I hadn't really thought about it my whole life. I hadn't really been like involved or really closely affected by abortion, so I never really, you know, I never really thought about it. But then yeah, man, when I started diving into it and studying abortion and the history of it and where we're at now, and then the pro-choice side, and you know how all of this stuff in light of the gospel is just one of the biggest spats in the face of God.
Yeah.
It was like, throw the gloves off, let's go, man.
Yeah.
We're doing this.
Yeah.
And, you know, I've got a background of being a little
Yeah.
pumped about things, and
Yeah.
I you know, I like not
Confrontation. And,
yeah, confrontation,
Yeah.
right, and those types of things. And I wanted to use aggression, but I'm not. It's not
Yeah.
like aggressive. I mean, it is, but it's like,
Yeah. No, I get it.
yeah, I got no issue with that. And I was like, let's do this.
Nice.
Like, yeah, this is as wrong as it gets.
Yeah.
You know?
That's great, man. I mean, yeah, that's good. That's good. It's so Jeff Durbin, same thing here, man. The first time I saw it like done, I don't say done the right way, but just on a basic street level, you know, where just seeing him go out there and talk to people and how easy it was for him to respond. I just think that's helpful for Christians. And that leads to my next question. When you saw these videos, is that what helped you prepare for the ministry? Is that what helped you prepare for the pro-life ministry to go out there and start trying to save babies and also reach the lost at abortion clinics? Like, so how does the preparation look like?
Yeah, so those definitely do help. I mean, we mimic a lot of it,
Yeah,
what we see on these, you know.
Yeah.
Most of what's going on right now, probably over the last 4 or 5 years, especially, is mimicking this stuff, right? Well, you've got Apologia out there. You've got people like John Barros out there. It's awesome to, you know, watch his story and see what they do. Rusty Thomas, basically all the ground that all these people would kind of be under in a way is kind of the ground of an abolitionist type movement, which is very, it's not a behind the scenes, you know, it's not strictly a political lobbying, that type of thing, you know, just leave it to a group or a lobbyist or something like that to take care of this and pass the right laws or anything like that. You know, the movement that's, you know, come out from these people and has been based more on, you know, hey, we're Christians, we have the gospel. If anyone's going to do something about it, it's going to be the body of Christ.
Right.
And so that's kind of been the, you know, the movement that's just taken off.
So I mean, let me understand what you're saying. It sounds like what you're saying is that just what prepared you was just being a Christian.
Yeah, right, right, yeah.
You see the gospel, you see sin, death, and then you see the antidote. You know, you know, what's going to fix this.
Right.
And then so you look at abortion, and that's what you see: is sin and death.
Right.
And then you're offering the gospel, and then along with these videos and these guys that you mentioned.
Right.
So I mean, that's pretty neat, man. That's again, I wish someone told me that years ago.
Yeah, for sure.
Personally, and I think I told you this before. I'm kind of the opposite of you. I don't do well with confrontation. You know, like I will confront someone if I have to, but I try to avoid it as much as I can, and maybe go a roundabout way of fixing things instead of getting in someone's face. I'm not saying that's what you do, but like, you know, like just heading to someone and then try to fix the problem right then and there.
Yeah.
And especially if it's going to be offensive to them, you know. And I've always thought like, man, well, I'm not equipped. I'm not prepared for this. You know, what if they stump me and I make a fool of Christ and of the church, and what if I start, and I had all these excuses.
Right.
And really, what you just said basically was, was, in light of the gospel, we should be out there. We have everything we need. And then that, but plus we have these guys out here who've been doing it for a while.
Yeah.
That we can kind of mimic and use them as like somewhat as a, what would you call it, like an example? Yeah, just use them as an example.
Absolutely.
And learn from them, right?
Yeah, and they're an open resource too.
Yeah.
I mean, these guys will talk to you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They in the abortion fight, these guys are almost like these are like the celebrities almost of the abortion fight, right? They would hate being called something like that, but they'll talk to you. You reach out to them, and they're like, "Oh yeah, awesome." They'll give you pointers and help you on things.
Yeah. Jeff Durbin, he's the same way. And it's funny because a long time ago he gave me his number, and he would respond. He actually responded, and I felt bad because like I know how busy he is, and so would Chris, And then one time he started getting busy in like recent years, and he also does Mormonism stuff, right?
Yeah.
So I came across an argument that was presented by a Mormon. I thought it was probably one of the best ones they brought up to me, and I gave it to Jeff Durbin in Messenger on Facebook, and Jeff Durbin said he'll get back to me, and he didn't. So like a week later, I told him, I was like, hey, guess what? I'm a Mormon now. and then he's like, oh, I'm sorry to hear that. And he thought I was serious, and I was like, I'm just kidding, brother. I'm just giving you a hard time. I know you're busy.
That's funny.
I was like, what do you think about this answer that I have? And he responds, man. These guys will respond to you, but really they're just like us, They're just like us, and they desire to have the body, which is cool, And
for sure.
So with that being said, man, you mentioned a few people already. Are there any books or resources that you recommend, like a go-to book that someone must have, or something that someone must in order to do this ministry effectively and properly? Is there something that besides the Bible, of course? Like, is there anything?
Yeah, absolutely. So so one of the easiest things to go get your hands on is watch the Babies Are Murdered Here movies.
Okay.
Yeah.
I still gotta watch those.
There's 2 of them now. The one that recently came out this year is quite a fire starter. It's a good one.
Yeah.
But that for sure. Pick up Sproul. Always a good resource, right?
Okay.
Sproul wrote a book on abortion. It's a great book on abortion. That guy always has a way of just explaining things in a way that makes sense, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he's got a lecture series on it too on YouTube. What else? Other books. Doctrine of the Lesser Magistrate is a great book.
Okay. What is it again?
Doctrine of the Lesser Magistrate.
Okay. That title itself it's unique, so we'll find it.
That's a great book. Give you an idea of the basically, as Christians, how it's up to us to stand in the gap and, in the fight for abortion, especially to protect, those who are the innocent being led, away to the slaughter, right? So just like we're commanded in Proverbs 24 to hold back those, right, being led away to the slaughter. And, we don't have an excuse not to.
Right.
We're commanded. Some other resources, a good website, abort73.com.
Yeah.
Great website. There's so many articles on there, and you can read through them. And they'll use statistics from resources that are basically like that would be more like on the pro-choice side, right? But these statistics are out there, and they use those, to basically debunk so many arguments that the pro-choice movement has. And that's a great website. There's actually, what else? There's a really good, to go along kind of the lines on the lesser magistrate thing too. There's another good resource that I read probably 3 or 4 years ago. And it's a essay written by William Lloyd Garrison.
Okay.
Excuse me. From the time of, the slave trade in America.
Wow.
And he was a leader in the abolitionist movement of that time.
Oh, nice.
And so it's a really cool essay that he wrote. It's called Exposure of the American Colonization Society.
Okay.
So it's a good read, and just about everything you read in it, it's not crazy. Like it's probably 40 pages.
Okay, that's not bad.
But
it's free online?
Yeah, it is.
Nice.
So if you like reading through that, you can see the parallels of what's going on now with what was going on during the time of slavery. Yeah. Because at that time, just like now, the movement that's sprouted up has been because of more or less the fact that, we're taking 3 steps back for like every 2 steps forward we take in the fight against abortion, as it is like politically. And so he goes in there, and you see the parallels of what's going on now, because just like then it got to a point where what are we doing? Just like with abortion now, we're almost 50 years into Roe versus Wade. Why are we 50 years into it? Yeah. It doesn't make sense. Right. I mean, we're the church, and we're 50 years into this, and we're, 60 million dead children deep, more than that, That just doesn't make sense at all. Not with the commands we're given in the Bible, as the church, not with the examples we're given in the Bible. In the 10 Commandments we're given, right? Thou shalt not murder. Right. Well, the whole purpose of that table of the 10 Commandments is love your neighbor. Yeah, right. That's our direction on loving our neighbor. Yeah. What are we loving our neighbor just by not murdering our neighbor? I mean, we're not, right? That'd be easy, right? Like, I didn't kill him. I know. Like, you know what I mean? So I'm doing pretty good, right? But it's not what it is, right? What comes with that is not just that negative declaration of what you're not supposed to do, but the positive declaration of what you are supposed to do to love your neighbor, right? Yes. So we're not supposed to murder, but we're supposed to do the complete opposite of that. Yeah. We're supposed to save our neighbor's life, right? If it comes down to that. Yes. And we're given the examples of that all throughout Scripture, right? I mean, when we go into the story of the Good Samaritan, right? I mean, it wasn't the fact that the Good Samaritan didn't kill the person. Because the other guys didn't either. They didn't kill him. I mean, he didn't die, obviously, but they didn't. Yeah. They didn't treat him badly. But the crime was the fact that they didn't rescue him. Right.
Before you go more into that, because that's going to lead to my next question regarding the church and state, and also abortion. You made a good point. Like 50 years in, if the church was so active, by now abortion wouldn't be as big or as allowed. And it does seem like in recent years there has been some actually I don't know, I guess good news to some extent on abortion clinics being shut down and all that. But at the same time though, I mean, like 50 years, and I don't know how many. You have an estimate of that number?
Yeah, it's always around 60 million.
Yeah, so that's just crazy. That's a crazy number. I mean, 60 million. I mean, you think about like, man, there could have been that many more human lives.
I was actually looking through this morning before we came here. I was looking through Wikipedia and the deadliest wars in human history, right? And I mean, since we're dealing with American, the numbers in America, 60 million dead, it blows away the wars America's been involved in, like American deaths. You go worldwide and it's crazy. I mean, I haven't calculated it, but I was thinking about it. I'm interested if the deaths by abortion outweigh all of the wars that we have recorded throughout human history. And we're talking, pre Christ era, as far back as these wars that they've recorded go. And I mean, I don't know what the total is worldwide, but we're about 1 million a year in the U.S. And but worldwide it's about 40 million a year. Yeah, it's big, dude.
It is, man, and it like the point you made earlier, it's just still echoing in my mind. Like the church, man, like the early church, that they were saving babies that were abandoned, and they're willing to be put to death for their faith alone, and these guys were on fire, and here we are in a country, especially in America, where we are able to exercise our free speech and do these things, and yet, when we go out there, it's like we're the only ones out there, and there's a few Catholic ladies with their rosary beads that are maybe walking around, I'm assuming praying probably, and or they bring their Virgin Mary. I only saw that once, that huge statue of the Virgin Mary, and start singing. Our city is the Bible Belt, supposedly, of California, and you would think, out of all cities, the abortion clinics here would be the most, I guess, disturbed by Christians, and when it comes to the church and state and our fight against abortion, you might hear some people say that the Bible says to follow the laws of the land, and abortion is legal. So why are you guys fighting against it? Or what could be your response to that, for someone who wants to tell Christians to just stop. This is not your fight. You shouldn't even be in this debate. This isn't a faith issue. It's a women's right issue. So, like, what's your response to someone saying that abortion is legal? It's a done deal. Just let it be.
Right. So, one thing to talk about with that is the statements that are made like, well, it's the law of the land. That's not necessarily true in itself.
Okay.
Yeah. I know you plan on doing some other
Yeah.
discussions when you get into the Constitution and stuff like
Yeah.
that, but Supreme Court doesn't make laws,
Okay.
plain and simple, right? So Supreme Court makes decisions on constitutionality, and the decision they made in Roe, for example, is not a constitutional decision.
Mm.
I mean, it just doesn't align with the Constitution, right?
Yeah.
We're told that life is an inalienable right.
Right.
And
Yeah.
the Constitution is prepared to protect the inalienable rights such as life. And so the Roe decision just flies in the face of that. It's the interesting thing when it comes to that is that there are states in which, according to state law, abortion is still illegal, but they do not enforce that law. So that's an interesting thing, because I believe listening to the apology, I'm pretty sure Arizona is one of those states that it's like their law hasn't been changed. Their law on homicide hasn't been changed. It still includes abortion as murder, but it's not enforced because the states have caved into a wicked decision.
Yeah. Wow.
In California, interesting enough, like our homicide law includes abortion as murder, but then has a subset in it that says that the broader one doesn't explicitly say abortion, but it says but it includes the murder of the unborn is homicide. Then it has a subset below that's been added in time that says unless it's procured by the woman, basically, as an abortion, right? Then it's not punishable under the homicide code. Although the interesting thing is, it's still recognized as homicide. It's just not a punishable homicide.
Wow, man.
Interesting, right?
Yeah.
So it wouldn't be in there if it wasn't recognized as homicide. So they recognize our own state law here.
That's crazy.
As liberal as we are, still recognizes abortion as homicide.
Wow.
And then besides that, why should the Christians be involved? Well, because this law is in direct conflict with the law we're given by God.
Yeah.
As I spoke about, we're positively told in God's word to save these people, to save the innocent, right? To stand up for especially the orphaned, and so a law like this flies in the face and directly conflicts with what God has ordered us to do and commanded us to do as Christians. And that would be absolutely the main reason why I'm supposed to be involved in this.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't know that. I didn't know that about California law, but really, yeah, if something contradicts God's law, we're supposed to. And I'll bring up a passage later on about that, but we're supposed to destroy those arguments and those reasons. Now, so it becomes an issue about morality and how we're supposed to view these things. Now, and without getting too technical or wordy, what should be how significant is morality in the abortion debate? And not only that, but since we can't really rely on the law being neutral. What's our end goal when it comes to going out there and preaching Christ and trying to save babies, especially when the law seems to be going against us, is what I'm saying,
Well, we're in a lot of trouble if we use society and government as our moral compass.
Right.
That's for sure.
Yeah.
Right? So, like you said, the slave trade in America was a legal thing. It was in our Constitution, those type. So we can't trust governments. We can't trust in man for guiding our morality, right? Yeah. Our morality has to be grounded in the biblical word of God. And that's important because, when we go out there, we get to stand on this real objective morality that honestly is recognized by people whether they want to or not, right? Yeah. And when you get into the morality thing with unbelievers and you watch like the debates that revolve around morality, as much as someone wants to claim that something like morality can be subjective, they don't live that way.
Right, yeah. Right.
And it makes it gives us such a good, that's our foundation to stand on, right? Yeah. I mean, we know it's wrong. It's objectively to murder another human being. Yeah, and we can't pretend that there's some type of neutrality. That's what society most of the time will want you to think, right?
Right.
The postmodern world especially wants to believe in neutrality and tolerance all over the place.
Right.
And so we can't, so you'll hear the argument a lot, or people will say things like, you can't legislate morality, right? You'll hear those goofy things, and that itself is just ridiculous, right? Everything that is legislated basically is based on a morality.
Right.
So it's one thing we're talking about when we talk about the myth of neutrality, right? It's not a question of whether or not morality is being legislated. It's which morality is going to be legislated, right?
Yes.
So, so people will try to bring up something like that and say, well, you're just trying to legislate, you know, your morality, like especially like, you know, your Christian morals. You're trying to legislate that. Well, of course I am, for one thing, but that's not in opposition to what you think is that, or you know, this pro-choice person. You know, this isn't in opposition to what you would say is not legislating morality,
right?
Because then all you're trying to do is legislate your morality.
Yes.
My morality bumping up against yours, right? Yeah. And then that's where we get into the discussion. I think I remember in your interview with Randy, he talked about that, where you know, when you have these two moralities that bump heads, you know, where do you get, you know, what happens then?
Yes.
You know, you can't go with this philosophy of tolerance and neutrality anymore. I mean, you just can't.
Right.
You know, something has to give.
Yes. Exactly.
And where does it give? Well, it's gonna give eventually. Well, what it should do, logical and sane world, is it gives into the objective morality that we know, right?
Yes.
So ultimately, I mean, as Christians, we know it as a direct command, but we also know that, you know, inherently in what the human being knows, especially when we're dealing with something like murder, we understand that it's wrong.
Yes.
I mean, there's, no matter how savage of a society you could find out there, there's some threshold where there's, you know, that's obviously wrong in their society, you know?
Yes.
So, I mean, so morality's huge, dude.
Man.
It's a big deal.
It's mainly because our only hope is the person and finished work of Christ. It's the gospel. Yeah. And I think that's what distinguishes some pro-life ministries from others, is that there are some pro-life ministries or movements that want to say, you know what, well, just don't include Bible verses, don't have signs out there. In fact, like, don't even be out there yelling at people or trying to persuade them, you know, away from the clinic. Instead, you know, do it at your workplace, do it, you know, over dinner or coffee, you know, and
or give us money and we'll take care of it.
Yeah, pretty much, yeah, or give us money so we can go speak at colleges. But so I mean, it's just one of those things where, you know, because the gospel it's our only hope, really. When it comes down to it, it's our only hope that we have. It's a message that has power, you know, to change someone. When we get to pro-life ministries that don't preach the gospel, that don't use Bible verses, but yet they're seemingly changing people's minds to not get an abortion, do we want to say that those ministries aren't good, that they're doing something bad?
Right.
How do we go about that?
Right. I wouldn't say they're bad. I would say, I think is it the guys with Apologia that always like to say, God can draw straight lines with a crooked stick.
Yeah.
Right. And so, and also the other saying, right, that even a broken clock's right twice a day.
Yeah.
So, I mean, they're not bad, you know, these efforts that are out there and, you know, the things that they're successful at. I mean, saving life is great. Yeah. I would say that to their own detriment, they're limiting themselves.
Okay.
And so what I mean about that, I give kind of a real life example. At one time there was a presentation given here locally, in fact, and it was basically a pro-life presentation. But the speaker that was invited to give it was a proclaiming feminist atheist. Like, that was kind of how they were introduced, right? And they prepared some slides. Some of the slides that they prepared that they talked about were, how do you coexist with someone like them in the pro-life world as a Christian, right?
Right.
Their presentation was all based on this assumption that there was some type of a neutrality that we can all just be on this even playing field with. They talked about, so don't talk about, you know, sin. Don't talk about, it said like affirm the separation of church and state, whatever. Yeah. That's another goofy one. I'm sure you can talk about it. Maybe with someone with Ben or something, right? When he comes on. But all these things were presented, and So I ended up going to the organizer of this, and I gave them my criticism on that. I basically told them, I said, what are you doing? I said, you're poisoning the well.
Oh, wow.
So why would you do that? What are you doing? You have a room full of Christians, and you let someone come and you endorse it on top of it. You let someone come and give something so against our worldview.
Yeah.
So I got in a discussion with her, and it turned in basically what we ended up ending out was a discussion on morality. Because this person brought up, they said, well, we have lots of atheists and non-Christian people in the pro-life fight, and they do a lot of good. I said, I agree. They said, well, why would you want to go against them and not want them to be in this? I said, well, I'm not against their efforts and what they do. The problem is that they're limited. I said, if their argument is without a moral argument, then what happens when you're faced with the person that gives you the argument that says the unborn is undoubtedly human, the unborn is undoubtedly a person, but there's nothing wrong with killing them? It says, well, what do you do? It says, if you throw morality out of it in the moral argument, what are you left with? How do you answer that person?
Right.
Now you're just butting heads
Yes.
with subjective morality.
Yes.
You're saying, well, I think it's wrong. Well, I think it's right.
Right.
So, I mean, you're limited.
And especially as Christians, when we actually present the law, when we're out there, and actually in general, when we present the law, it should always follow that we present the gospel as well.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a principle that just as Christians that we have, and for one, yeah, we can't just leave God's law out of it, like you're saying. That's what we stand on. That's our foundation to what's right and what's wrong, and then that should follow naturally the gospel.
Right.
It's almost as if like when we evangelize anywhere else, we know that's true, law and gospel, right? But when we're out there at the abortion clinics or talking about abortion in general, just leave the gospel out and leave the commandments out. Try to reason without it,
Right.
And if you just present the gospel, I mean the law, and that's it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, you let someone without hope.
Right.
You just condemn them. They know they're doing wrong, but now what's next?
Right.
It should follow naturally the gospel. Now people present arguments. The times I've been out there, people will yell at me or try to take my phone, and
Oh man, that was great.
Yeah, I know.
We get a lot of drive-by, right?
Yeah.
Drive-by yelling and drive-by middle fingers.
And sometimes people might come and try to discourage us from what we're doing. But I want to read one passage. I mean, like now I think we're going to get into some of the good stuff as far as like the arguments go, right? But before that, let's just read this passage. 2 Corinthians chapter 10, starting at verse 4, it says this: For the weapons of our warfare are not of the flesh, but have divine power to destroy strongholds. We destroy arguments and every lofty opinion raised against the knowledge of God, and take every thought captive to obey Christ, being ready to punish every disobedience when your obedience is complete. This whole idea of we destroy arguments and every lofty opinion raised against the knowledge of God, I think that right there actually spits in the face of those Christians who don't want conflict, who just want to have peace with everyone, never mention how abortion is murder, and just, I mean, the sad reality is that, I mean, I know this for a fact, actually, a lot of people within church have had abortions while being in church, I'm always surprised when I talk about these things. A lot of times women, I can tell by their face now, it's become that frequent. As I'm talking about it, they won't look at me, and they're kind of looking down, and they're nodding their head as an agreement. And at the end, they confess, like, I had an abortion, and this was early on, and it's typically early on in their Christian walk or while they're in church. And I'm just thinking, I was like, did anyone tell you? Did anyone tell you that it's a sin, or that And then what they do is they hear from the experts, air quotes experts, and they say that no, well, it's not really human, it's not really a life. And we're gonna get into those arguments in a little bit. We're called to destroy these arguments and these lofty opinions that are raised against the knowledge of God. Especially when we're out there evangelizing.
Just like you mentioned, even people that are, Christians that have had abortions, even while being a Christian, right? It's the gospel in their lives that leads them to the repentance that they do have with that, right?
And not only that, but just to add on to it. And I'm not just talking about the women, the Christian women, our sisters who had abortions in the past, but also men who drove their friends to the abortion clinic. I've been told that as well. And at times when I talk about these things, they give me the same look. They won't look at me, and then they admit to me afterwards, like, "Did I do something wrong?" I'm like, "Yeah, you did." But look to Christ. Like,
right.
Don't place your hope in how much you can do for the pro-life ministry. Put all your hope in Christ, and and Christ died for that sin.
Right.
You know, and you're free. You're free now. You know,
I mean, we're dealing with just people dead in their sins. That's what we're doing when we're out there. There's no cure to that other than the gospel.
Right.
I mean, that's why we're out there. Yes, we're out there to save lives and to save babies, but we can't forget that we're out there for lost sinners. You know, we're out there for the mother. We're out there for the fathers. We're out there for anybody who brought them. We're out there for the employees of the abortion mill.
Yes, yes. That's a good point, by the way. I'm glad you brought that up about the employees.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're out there for all of them, and you know, if we're not bringing the gospel out there, we're bringing, you know, we're not bringing any hope to combat the real issue underlying why they're, you know, why they're there in the first place. You
no longer have to carry it on your back, you know. But now what you got to do is obey Christ, and Christ said to go everywhere, you know, everywhere, including abortion clinics, and preach the gospel. And what these guys are telling us, these pro-life movements that want to be without Christ or without the gospel, they're saying, well, don't evangelize here. Somehow reason with them, but don't share the gospel here. And no, we rather obey Christ. You know, 2 Timothy 3:16, all scripture is breathed out by God and profitable for teaching, for reproof, for correction, and for training in righteousness, that the man of God may be complete, equipped for every good work. Or Paul says that basically the Bible is our weapon. The Word of God is our weapon, right? It's our sword. It's important, and this is why I love Arks of Bulrushes, man, because you guys do emphasize the gospel and scripture. You're out there with the cone, and you know, and you're sharing with them what the Bible says, and I remember you have directed it at the employees, which is, I think is pretty cool. You know, it's amazing because you're also giving them, you're letting them know that what they're doing is wrong, but also giving them the gospel. So that's cool, man.
And you know, it's important for us to keep that focus on the gospel too, because you know, when we're out there, especially at the end of our time out there, we get together, you know, and we do a prayer. You know, we leave that place with the gospel focus, understanding that, you know, we did as we were commanded by God. You know, we shared the good news of forgiveness of sins through Christ. And, you know, when we leave, we lay it at Christ's feet. It's what we do. Yeah. You know, we don't take the burden home with us, and we don't take it home and we say, man, you know, nobody turned away today. I didn't save any babies. Yeah. I didn't save anybody today. You know, we don't leave with that. We leave joyous that the gospel was presented. We leave joyous that Christ, you know, in his sovereignty, you know, his atonement and resurrection, you know, ascension, you know, his kingship and his reigning today, you know, that is, you know, our comfort in knowing that we can leave from that place. Yes. You know, knowing that his will be done. You know, we don't have to carry that burden. We don't carry the burden of the other of the people's sins with us, I guess. Yes. But that makes sense, right? Right. You know, you go into Ezekiel, right? It's Ezekiel. Anyways, we're the Watchmen, right? Oh, yeah, the discussion of the Watchmen, right? And you know what's presented there. Well, if you know what to give to somebody, right? A warning, basically, right? With the Watchmen, you know to give the warning, and you don't, then their blood is on your hands. Yes. If you give the warning and they don't heed your warning, their blood is on their own hands. Yes.
We have an obligation to preach God's word, and we also believe that He's sovereign. At the same time, that gives us comfort, though. You know, that gives us comfort that it doesn't depend on us how well we do it. You know, we all can't be Jeff Durbin, you know, and or these other guys, you know, and but we're just called to preach the gospel, preserve life, protect life, and that's it, you know, and God does the work. So I want to jump quickly into these arguments. I picked some of the arguments that weren't too easy, you know, for example, one that says like, oh, well, you're a man. So we're not gonna cover that, you know. Yeah. When someone starts making those kind of arguments, it's becoming pretty obvious that they're not sure what to say. Now they can't answer our objections, so they're just gonna appeal to things that just don't really matter. Like one thing is like, you know, well, you guys aren't biologists, you know, but in this case, this case we do have one. So anyways, man, so I want to go over 6 pro-abortion arguments or reasons for abortion, and we'll go through these. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna present these to you. You have a lot more experience than I do in this. I'm going to want the listeners to hear you out and see how you're able to answer these questions. First one is this, that abortion is a vital aspect to women's healthcare or women's health.
Yeah, so to start with this, though, this is getting into the realm of using very emotionally charged arguments and situations, with these especially very rare situations, right? And using these as some type of an argument to justify abortion as a whole, right? Yeah. So health of the woman, right? That's extremely emotional, right?
Yeah.
Along the lines of when people even include discussions of like rape, right? Very emotional topics. So to start with that, this is something that, if you look at the statistics, is an extremely, extremely rare case, where a mother's life is necessarily threatened by, the child. In that case, but in the case of that, the answer that biblically that we would have for that is that obviously we care about the mother's life, right? In any situation, is that, this isn't just it's only about the baby, not about the mother or anything like that, right? But when you talk about a situation like that, where we would say society should lean on that is in line with originally, basically what doctors would take as I say originally because it's changed over time, but what the Hippocratic Oath originally was intended or stated was that a physician's care is for all people, right? That's the oath they take, so to care for all people from the beginning, from conception. Yes. That type of language was originally in such an oath. So in the case where you have a pregnant mother with her life, in jeopardy, the doctor's obligation is to treat both. He has two patients to treat, right? Yes. And in that treatment, it may be that you lose the life of the child, for instance, but the loss of child in the attempt to save both is not a favorable outcome, but it's not the intention of any act, right? So you don't make your intentional act is not to kill one to save the other. Your intentional act is to save both. Right. The consequence may happen to be that you lose the child, right, in the process. I mean, that's completely different than what an abortion would be, right? I mean, abortion is an intentional act to kill the child. Yes. And then the argument regarding back alley abortions, for the most part, that's it's very empty type of rhetoric that gets thrown out there. On one sense, because of actual history and statistics don't back up what they're trying to charge and make that argument to be. They want to make it seem like, well, you have a million abortions a year right now. So you make abortion illegal, now you have a million back alley abortions. Well, that doesn't follow. It just doesn't. Yeah. And if you look at history, historically, it doesn't either. Yeah, I heard that they were trying to say that thousands happen per year in America, but really it was like less than 100 or something. Yeah, it was a much smaller number than what was originally presented, leading up to Roe. And the people that presented those numbers, some of them have, they're by their own admission, they say they inflated those numbers. Wow. They're just, those numbers just aren't necessarily true. And it's not necessarily true that just because Roe was decided, the Roe decision, and supposed, the legalization of abortion doesn't necessarily follow that illegal abortions have necessarily declined. I mean, they still occur. Yeah. If it's completely illegal, then why still illegal abortion still happening? Right. It just doesn't happen. What also is thrown into that is the fact that, well, the discussion of laws, right, and lawmaking. Well, why make any law if it means that just because somebody can go against that law, right, then that's not our reason to not make that law, right? We don't, let's legalize bank robberies because if you make them illegal, people are still going to do them, and it's possible they're going to get hurt in the process.
Right.
You know what I mean? It just doesn't follow. It doesn't make any sense to go that way.
Yeah.
And I watched someone have a discussion on this once, and they brought up a good point to the person that they were talking to about it. They said, they basically said, you think that you're the one standing up for women, but yet your argument saying that women are just going to turn to back alley abortions is so incredibly degrading to a woman.
Right.
Like, you're basically saying, well, if you make a law against this, women are, the way he put it, you're saying women are so stupid and sinful that they won't be able to help themselves, but get themselves into these situations, and that's ridiculous.
Yes.
You make a law against something like that, it's the numbers are gonna decline. It's just what it is.
Yeah. Okay, that's good, man. Now, the second argument or reason, it's just saying that no one is legally obligated to sustain someone else's life. So why is that being pushed on women?
Run down the violinist argument.
If you want to do that, go for it, man.
Yeah. So it's an argument that's presented where, with a hypothetical situation where basically the story goes, you find yourself waking up one day and you're in a bed and you're back to back with another person, and you're connected to this person with tubes and wires and all these things, and you realize, that you realize the situation, and you find out that what has happened is, there's a society of, music lovers, right? And they've got their favorite violinist, this world-renowned violinist, and this violinist has a kidney condition, and they can't survive without some type of procedure where they're connected to somebody. They happen to find out that you're the very only person in the world that matches this person in the perfect way, where you can sustain their life for so long, right? The argument says like 9 months. What if it's this long? That it takes on these extra things. So the main problem with that argument is that it in no way parallels pregnancy, right? So we got a few problems with it. First of all, in that argument, someone finds themselves in a situation where they had absolutely no control over being put in that situation. Well, pregnancy involves sexual intercourse, right? Majority of the time, a consensual sexual intercourse, right? We know what sexual intercourse does, right? It's a procreation. Yeah. I mean, ultimately, it's for procreation. We understand that what can happen as a result of sexual intercourse is pregnancy.
Yes.
So the argument just doesn't follow when it comes to that, right? There's the part of the argument that talks about, well, this person's a complete stranger in this argument, right? Well, in the case of a mother and a child, you're not talking about complete strangers. You're talking about a human life that is part of you. I mean, honestly, you were part of creating that life. That life has half of its genetic information is from you, and so this doesn't follow that you're dealing with a complete stranger either. And then the other part being, in this situation, our bodies, in particular in this situation, like our kidneys are not created and purposed for sustaining the life of another person.
Right.
They can be used for that, absolutely. I mean, we have miracles that God has given in His providence, allowed for us to be able to do those types of things, but that is not the function of the human kidney in this situation, right? Whereas in the situation of a pregnancy, everything is operating exactly the way that it's created and designed to be. Right. Sperm has met egg. We have genetic material that's combined. We have a distinct human life, and this distinct human life is actually residing in the very place it's supposed to be residing. That's the function and the purpose of the uterus for the woman, is for the receiving and for the sustaining of the life of the child in a pregnancy. So those types of things just don't follow in that argument. So saying that you're not legally obligated to sustain someone else's life is, it's just ridiculous. you're talking about a totally different situation, where everything in the situation of pregnancy is operating the way it's supposed to. Yeah. And you're not dealing with a stranger, you're dealing with a child. That is your child. I mean, you did put the word legally in there. It's a difficult, right? That's a difficult one. When you talk about that, because so our current law says, whatever. But, but when we talk about, real objective moral standards and moral law, you are legally obligated to sustain someone's life if you are capable to. Right?
It's one of those more craftier type of arguments. Half truth, half lie type of thing, and then with some very carefully thought out scenario. It's just crazy to me, like the length someone would go to just want to justify killing an unborn child, And,
right.
So the next one is this: the child will most likely have a poor quality of life. So it could be poverty or health and deformities, anything. The fact is that this child will have a poor quality of life. Therefore, it's better it's better to abort this pregnancy.
Right. Yeah, so they somehow try to make abortion, and if they're a supporter of abortion, not only, trying to make themselves as some type of protector, but now as some type of, I guess they try to make themselves heroic, right? Yeah. They're arguing for this idea of like, look at, I've provided a mercy for this child, right? Like, this child had a 3 in 5 chance of growing up in poverty, having parents that didn't love it, and so therefore we save that child from what it could have been and could have gone through, and so we murdered the child, right? We what is a mercy kill, right? That might be the way that's what they turn this type of argument into. But so the way that this basically plays out when we have these discussions turns into, I don't remember like what it's called. There's like a law of, I don't know, like but it's like a a law of possibility, or unsure, and I don't remember how it's worded exactly. But Sproul goes into it. He's better than I am at this, obviously. But the discussion is like, if there's some type of even an inkling, right, of whether or not something is life, or something detrimental to something, we don't err on the side of that which is most detrimental. We don't err on the side of the detrimental, right? So I think the analogy that Sproul may have talked about, I don't remember, but is like, if you're hunting and you're out hunting and you're out and there's other hunters in the area, when you see the bush move in front of you, you don't fire on the bush because of the possibility that it could be one of the other hunters, right? Without having a clear vision of what it is that you're doing in that instance, you don't err on the side that is the careless side necessarily, right? Or what could be ultimately detrimental to another person. Right. When it comes to this issue, it follows the same way, and especially with this, who's to predict the quality of life that a child has, right? Even with a deformity, or some type of physical deformity or abnormality or something, we all know children that have those things, and people and grown adults that have those and live their whole lives with them. And I've never met somebody that said, man, it really sucks that I've lived like this my whole life, and I really need to just if they really believed that, they wouldn't be standing there talking about it, right? I'm just saying.
That's the thing about that too, man. I said I wouldn't say anything. I'm hearing I'm blabbering off. But Steve Hawking, he was the one that's on the chair, and he has the machine to talk for him and stuff. He said himself that he would like to be valued, or in every way that a normal person is valued. I chopped that up quite a bit, but it was along those lines, that he just wants to be seen and accepted as like a normal person would. They say, well, I'm sorry, Hawking, you should actually die. It's better for you to die because of your quality of life.
Right.
It's better for you to probably to not have lived at all, because look how you are. Anyone who says that would be looked at like, wow, like you're a monster and you're crazy, You're insane to tell him that. He's clearly I don't know too much about him, but from what I read a little bit, he's actually pretty significant in the scientific community. We love those type of stories where someone can pick themselves up and become something, right? And they may have started out very poorly.
Right.
Right. Here's another it's not really an argument. Here, I'm just gonna read it first, and let's see what you say to it. Okay. So imagine you're out there and someone tells you this, right? You don't abort a human baby. You abort a pregnancy. Or quote from Harvard says this: abortion is the removal of pregnancy tissue, products of conception, or the fetus and placenta after birth from the uterus. In general, the term fetus and placenta are used after 8 weeks of pregnancy. Pregnancy tissue and products of conception refer to tissue produced by the union of an egg and sperm before 8 weeks. Other terms for an abortion include elective abortion, induced abortion, termination of pregnancy, and therapeutic abortion. And this is, again, from the health department of Harvard University. We have these signs out there that say, abortion is murder, babies are murdered here. And they respond with this: abortion isn't about aborting a human baby, it's about aborting a pregnancy.
This is where there's some interesting history behind in this too. Our awesome, so progressive postmodern world we live in, it's where we're just advancing, in all these ways, for some reason, first in this area, and this is even a Harvard, from Harvard, we're going backwards in this. I mean, these definitions that you're finding in here, calling it, a child pregnancy tissue.
Yeah, products of
conception is just like, it's crazy. I mean, you go back when I was in school, we weren't presented with these terms.
Right.
We knew what it was. You go back. I mean, we're going backwards in this. An interesting thing is you can find like Planned Parenthood brochures from 50s, 60s, something like that, where they discuss abortion in there, and that those brochures actually describe abortion as the killing of a baby. Those words are used, that a baby is killed. Yeah. And in order to protect that killing of a baby, they change these terms. They're just changing terms. That's all they're doing. It's still the same thing, right? We know that. It's interesting when you go and you talk to people and you see in the fight, why that these people think that using terms like fetus or zygote, that these terms somehow dehumanize the child, right? That's why when I go out there, I don't have a problem. I'll talk with someone, about it. I don't mind using a term like fetus. I don't mind using a term zygote. Those are all human stages of life. It's what they are. It doesn't bother me one bit. It doesn't take the humanity away.
Yes.
If it wasn't a human being, then you couldn't use the term fetus.
Right.
Because it wouldn't make sense.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. It's just interesting, man, because I see it more of probably out of all the arguments here, I see this one more as a not really a gotcha type of question, or a type of argument or reason, but just trying to prove that you don't know what you're talking about, by using abortion. For example, we say, baby in the womb, technically, baby is when it's finally born. Right. And they'll try to correct you on that, or using abortion, don't abort your baby, and then they want to say, no, well, I'm not going to abort my baby. I'm going to abort the pregnancy.
Right.
And I see these type of reasons or arguments to be somewhat disingenuous. Because it's true what they're saying, technically it's true,
Right.
But at the same time, though, it's like, okay, is that really a reason for your abortion? Talk to us about the real issue here. Is that a human life? Which brings us to our fifth argument. It's not a person, it's only a clump of cells. It's not self-aware. Early on in development, it doesn't experience pain.
Well, so this is where, I like to get into using, my biology background too, I mean, first of all, it's not just it. Okay, first of all, we're all clumps of cells.
Yeah,
you're a clump of cells too. What? You're a clump of cells, Arturo. So, there's nothing false about the fact that I'm made up of cells.
Yeah,
that's okay.
Okay.
But that doesn't. But obviously, what this is getting at is taking away the humanity.
Yes.
Right? Somehow if you just use it's only a clump of cells, you've taken away the humanity of it. Well, the only reason you're going to go towards that is because that, you know, that justifies,
right.
you know, marginalizing and killing this person,
yeah.
right? If you can dehumanize them,
right,
that's what it comes down to. You know, so the fetus is, you know, things like the fetus is not self-aware. Well, you know, that's a subjective determination of what makes a human life. You know,
right.
where does self-awareness determine human life?
Right.
I mean, I can't think of an instance,
Yeah,
right?
exactly,
I mean, you know, does you know, someone under anesthesia, are they no longer a human being because they're not aware?
Right.
You know, they're not self-aware in the state of anesthesia, right?
Yes, exactly.
You know, it does not follow that we're then, you know, morally allowed to kill that person.
That's good.
Pain, another subjective, you know, determination of what makes a human being. Same thing. I mean, you know, go back to anesthesia. But you know, these are all subjective. These all become subjective markers of what human life is.
Right.
You know, all in the case to dehumanize, because the understanding is that it is a human being. I mean, you know what I mean? So how do you dehumanize that person? You have to come up with a marker to dehumanize them, just like happens in like, you know, we'll go back, you know, American slave trade. You know, those people, you know, the African slaves that they were bringing over had to be dehumanized somehow.
Yes.
Right. So it became like, well, they're savages. They're, you know, whatever different things. Right. You go farther in, you know, we get into like, you know, later on in this country, and you have like, you know, when you're talking about civil rights and stuff, and there's always another way to dehumanize someone in some way, whether it's been skin color or, you know, or sex, right? Any way that somebody can subjectively come up with a marker to dehumanize someone. So, I mean, honestly, the answer to that is that, you know, we can't go off these subjective things when there's an objective, actual truth to what makes a person a person. Now, and those are, you know, we have a few different things. We have biblically objective,
right?
You know, when a person's a person, right? We have, you know, we have things such like, you know, in the Psalms, you know, where we talk, you know, we're told in the Word of God that, you know, that we're formed in the womb. You know, we're told like in Jeremiah that, you know, God knew him before he was formed in the womb, right? Those things. We have, even things such as in, you know, Mosaic law, right, where the unborn are protected. They're actually given, you know, right, they're actually given the same protection as an adult human, right? Where what's the discussion, you know, that in, you know, quite a few people hit on this and what they've written, and that's the discussion where you have the instance where you have the woman, you know, who gets unintentionally injured, and when two men are fighting, right? You have the woman that gets injured, right? And particularly a pregnant woman, right? And if she gets injured, but there's no harm, you know, to her or the child, basically, right? It's, you know, there's basically like you have your recompense for harming her, but you know, that's it. But then it goes on, it says, but then if you injure her and that injury causes the death of that child, you know, then the punishment is eye for eye, tooth for tooth, life for life.
Right.
You know what I mean? So even in the law, you know, or the, you know, Mosaic biblical law, you know, we're presented with the fact that, you know, biblically, yes, you know, we have an objective determination of a person. And then biologically, you know, probably, I mean, look, science is 100% on the pro-life side. There's no denying it, and that's what I'm talking about. All this stuff blows me away as how backwards they start going. Right? You want a very clear line drawn when life begins, then it's at conception. There's no other point that you can pick scientifically that's going to delineate it that way. At the point of conception, when you have that very first cell of that individual human being, you have a cell that is living, right? You have a cell that's performing the actions of life. What's defined? I mean, you look up in any biology textbook, what you find defined as life, you know, it matches that.
Wow.
Not only that, you have an individual that's different from the mother and the father completely.
Right.
I mean, it shares some traits, right?
Yeah.
But that individual does not completely match the father. The individual does not completely match the mother genetically. That individual is completely different. I could totally nerd out right now and go into the, meiosis and mitosis and how, gametes are, carry genetic material and all that. But it's so clear, like these types of things, they can be boggling, but, you start, but what it comes down to, you bring up the subjectivity of it again, and, usually when you're able to present the information, it shuts down that argument. A lot of these are arguments that it's funny you bring up. I mean, you bring up all these arguments, and you almost look at these as like, I mean, we can almost see them as like, oh, well, this, when I encountered this person, they said this argument. When I encountered that person, so often you'll encounter someone and you'll get all of these arguments.
Yes, yeah.
Because as you defeat one, they switch to the other.
Right.
They grasp onto anything that they have.
That's what I was going to tell you that right now is that first three arguments, those were mainly like emotional charged arguments. They want to appeal to the child's quality of life, But once you start answering those objections and they have nothing left, it seems like the arguments get darker and darker and darker. The heart hardens, and they'll say things like, you don't abort the human baby, abort pregnancy, or it's not a person, it's a clump of cells. Then you can finally get down to, which is our last argument, it's my body, my choice. We will dedicate more time right now to bodily autonomy. How do you briefly answer something like that? When someone says, my body, my choice, do you ever think of something to say right away that kind of just, I don't know, refutes that slogan, or how do you normally go about that?
What happens a lot, this is one of those instances where we can get into the realm of what bad pro-life arguments can be sometimes, because the response to this sometimes can be a bad response. So sometimes the typical response you see when you encounter this is, oh yeah, do you have 20 fingers? Or if it's a boy, do you have a penis? Right? Those types of things. Yeah. They're, I mean, depending on who it is you're talking to.
Right.
Yeah. Maybe that type of response is warranted. I don't know. It just depends how your discussion's going.
How about this? Okay, so how about it better? Because we're now, I know you want to get into body autonomy. That's basically what the answer is, right? But,
yeah.
But so things not to say is, well, okay, do you have 20 fingers, or you have a penis now?
Right.
And so is there anything else that we shouldn't say? Like one thing that I don't want to say, and maybe if I was white, I definitely wouldn't say it, is, oh well, my property, my slave, or something like that, or
right.
I wouldn't say that, especially, I mean, if I'm Hispanic, and at least I don't think we have a history of owning slaves, but even then, like I wouldn't say things like that. A lot of times I wonder if those type of responses are just meant to like ruffle up some feathers, or truthfully prove a point. Is there anything else that we shouldn't say when someone brings that up?
That's probably, that's the one like you hear almost everywhere.
Yeah,
I've used it before too. So it's not like I'm guilty of it.
Or how about this? How about when someone says, well, no, it's not your body, because if it was your body, then you'd be dead.
Right. Well, yeah. So there's that, right? Well, then the abortion would kill you, right?
Yeah.
Body, or,
is that a bad response, or you think that's a...
I mean, so I think it's a bad argument in that it doesn't actually further the discussion.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah, right.
It's not a bad argument in that it's like not true.
Mm-hmm.
But the problem is you're not getting to the heart of the discussion. Right? So when someone says my body, my choice, they're not saying that because they really think, their answer to you is never going to be, yes, I have 20 fingers.
Right.
I mean, it's not what they're thinking when they say that, right? That's not the thing. It's, what they're getting at is, it's the autonomy argument is what it comes down to. All right,
so let's talk about that then. Like, when it comes down to it, and maybe I'm wrong on this, but those 6 arguments, yeah, they're common, but maybe some of the better ones, maybe there's better arguments out there, but those are the ones that I hear typically that are like, all right, this requires a little bit more explanation.
For sure.
And I try to phrase them in a way that furthers discussion, So, but now when it comes down to it, pretty much it comes down to bodily autonomy and whether or not that's human life, right? Mm-hmm. It's always those two things that it comes down to, right? Would you agree? Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. I'm trying to figure out.
Yeah, no, it does.
Human life and body autonomy, is that basically what it comes down to usually when it comes to answering these objections?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, good. All right. So how do we argue against bodily autonomy?
So quickly, like the real argument when it comes to bodily autonomy, so the place that you would go with that is Well, so you can bring up the situation of, okay, someone who commits rape, right?
Mm-hmm.
They did something with their body
Mm-hmm.
that they wanted to do with their body. They felt that this is what they wanted to do, it was pleasurable to them, and they decided to do it. And is that okay? You know, you're not going to find a pro-choice that's going to be like, right. Oh yeah, you're right. You know, there's nothing wrong with it. You know what I mean? You know, they're going to say, well, yeah, because you can't do something that violates someone else's body. Right. And you go, good. I'm glad we're on the same lines. Right. And you start going down that road of, you know, so, you know, there is a real concept of bodily autonomy, but bodily autonomy doesn't trump everything. Yeah. Right. There's obviously this line that was just drawn in rape, that, you know, when your bodily autonomy, you know, or what you choose to do with yourself, especially, you know, harms or kills another person, you know, there's a limit there, right? We don't push it beyond that limit. You know, your bodily autonomy doesn't trump their right for health and life. Okay. And so that's where it goes. I mean, so you bring up, this goes back to that discussion of like legislating morality and stuff, right? Right. Well, do you legislate bodily autonomy? Of course. Like laws are, like all laws are developed, you know, to basically limit what we can do as a human. Like, you know what I mean? Yeah. I mean, we don't have complete autonomy over whatever we want to do. It's just, it doesn't exist like that. And, so, I mean, that's a good direction to go with that and to talk about those things. I like the way how Jeff Durbin also put it. And you basically said the same thing right now. But, you know, can I use my body to hurt you? Right. You know, and legally? Well, of course not. So I don't have bodily autonomy, you know. And when they say things like my body, my choice, you know, even that phrase in itself is not a true statement. And they don't even believe that if you push them on it, right? Right. Can you really use your body? Can you choose to do anything you want with your body? And the answer is no. You know, so. You know, how we can take this into the gospel, too. You know, so, you know, where, you know, our sin, I mean, we go back, you know, we talk about the fall and, you know, and then the way we, you know, live as humans now. Autonomy is like really like our foundational sin against God. Okay, yeah. Right? Yeah. I mean, because we believe that we know better than God. We believe we can live a life without God. Right. We can, you know, all those things. We believe that, you know, regardless of what God's law is and what God says, that it's up to us and what we choose to do. Yeah. Right. And the gospel message, you know, destroys that. Right. I mean, it takes that away. It's this understanding that, you know, when we can present that and we can understand that, you know, our depraved state and what we are in sin, like, thank God that I don't have 100% autonomy in my life anymore. You know, thank God that he reached into my life and changed my sinful heart. You know, because if I was left to my autonomy, I'm lost. Yes. You know, I'm not, I mean, left to myself and autonomy, you're just, you know, you're without hope, you're depraved, you know, there's no limit to, you know, your wickedness, honestly. So, I mean, that's how God's word and the gospel message relates to bodily autonomy, honestly. It's, man, I want to chop it up so bad, and it's a good quote, but Spurgeon said that, you know, that God could be God except for on his throne or something like that. It's the idea that we like to believe in God except for him on his throne, which is he's a sovereign over all, right? Over our minds, hearts, bodies. Right. It's the God who governs it all. It's by his law, and it's not on our own. And bodily autonomy, it goes against that, you know. So one thing that I've been doing lately is I've been trying to come up with certain acronyms for theology points, you know? And you actually brought up one through Messenger on abortion, and it was SLED, and I can't believe I never came across this. Yeah, man, it's everywhere. I never came across it. I was so surprised, and I never came across SLED. And we dealt with bodily autonomy. Now let's deal with that it's human life. Yeah, so let's cover it, man. So if you can quickly just explain, man, what's SLED, and I'm sure there's lectures on it, there's videos on it on YouTube, so people can easily look it up. For sure. What this stands for is basically where our pro-life arguments should pretty much, we should get to this point when we have, you know, when we have any type of discussion or debate on pro-life. That's why this is so prevalent out there. I mean, there's not a pro-life, lecture out there probably that doesn't, you know, include what SLED is, you know. I mean, everybody from, you know, from one side to the other, you know, whether they're like, you know, your traditional very pro-life to the type of abolitionists, even like Jeff Durbin, you know, side and all that, they all
Right.
go to SLED. I mean, because it's, you know, this acronym, you know, and what this is basically is, you know, a means for getting to the meat of the discussion, which is, you know, the marginalization of the preborn is, because I mean that's the meat of what this is about, right? You know, it's the marginalization. That's the main thing that we're talking about, and so SLED goes to where we address that.
Nice.
Right? So we have SLED. So SLED, SLED. So S is size.
Okay.
So all these are based on, right, like I said, marginalization. So we marginalize the unborn based on size, based on level of development, based on their environment, and based on degree of dependency.
Okay.
So typically every time you get into a discussion, you know, you can lead into one of those areas.
That's just helpful, man. That's just so helpful.
Yeah.
You know, it's because looking back at the videos and things that you said in the past, I just see how these are the 4 points that are typically covered along with bodily autonomy, right?
Right. Absolutely.
And this is where I think if Christians could just ingrain this in their mind, arguments against bodily autonomy and SLED.
Yeah.
And make it where obviously you use the word of God. You know, you can use the word of God for every point. It's God's word that has the power, right, to change someone, to point them to the gospel. You basically covered all this in the arguments, by the way. In the arguments that we went over.
Yeah.
You covered size, level of development, environment, you know, degrees of dependency.
Right.
In those 6 arguments, you hit all those points. I don't know if it was intentional or not, but
well, I think I mean this argument. I think the acronym itself is made based on that, right?
Yeah.
It's like it always this is the recognition of all of those arguments result in actually having this discussion, right? And they're all based on one of these things. Each of these points in the SLED acronym, right, being a point in which someone is trying to dehumanize the unborn somehow, or justify killing them, right? And in each one of these instances, you're able to bring up and have the discussion of, you know, well, why is size a determining factor of, you know, somebody's right to live? Right. Exactly. So where is that? Do you apply that? Where else would you apply that? Well, you don't apply that anywhere. You know, why do we, you know, why do we go to these subjective things, right? You know, we don't apply any of these to other aspects of life or of human life and say, well, you know, because this person is in this type of environment, now they're less human and it's okay, you know, like there's nothing wrong with killing that person because of that. You know, degree of dependency is a big one, right? I mean, you know, that one's huge. And I was actually listening to a podcast yesterday that the fetal position podcast, right? And they were talking about that one. And
I'm glad you mentioned that because I want people to know about that podcast. So it's good.
And you know, he was talking about that on there and degree of dependency, and you know, he brought up an interesting kind of parallel story with that, and he said, so suppose somebody is, well, he used like a helicopter. So he said, suppose you're in a helicopter with somebody and it's your helicopter and you're flying them around, you know, and giving them a tour of something. And, you know, during this time, you know, riding with this person, you know, you come to a disagreement on something. I think he used like, you know, socialism or communism or something. And this person has basically just totally ticked you off. And now you've told them, you know what, this is my helicopter, and I don't want you in it anymore. Get out. He said, so, you know, so is it morally okay for that person to kick that person out of the helicopter at 2,000 feet in the air? You know what I mean? It was funny, and it was like, he's like, you know, he's bringing that because that person's dependent on that helicopter for their life. You know, just because, you know, what they're dependent on doesn't, just because you're dependent on something else to preserve your life doesn't mean that it's okay for your life to be taken because you're relying on that. So it was an interesting little parallel kind of story he made. It was
it makes sense.
But I mean, all these everything, like you said, all these arguments lead to this, right? And this is when it comes down to, like, you know, when you get into having discussions and having abortion centered arguments, like we can be distracted by a lot of rhetoric. We can be thrown off by what sounds like sophisticated arguments. You know, when someone like recites the violinist argument to you, it can throw you off, it can trip you up. Sounds like, oh man, someone's really thought this out. You know what I mean? Or you know, the slogans, my body, my choice. You know, what else do they say? Keep your theology off my biology, right? Or you know, if you don't have a uterus, you don't have a say. Those types of things, right? I mean, they're all very emotionally charged and, you know, type of rhetorics that are out there. And the reason why they keep with them, the reason why those things stick around is because they trip people up. Yes. You know, there's things about them that can trip you up. You know, like my body, my choice. Well, we don't want to be the bad guy that, you know, that's trampling on someone else's rights, right? Because that's what they, you know, it sounds like that, right? Oh yeah, well I can't, no, I don't want to trample on your rights, you know, those types of things. Yeah. But that's why it's important to keep the main thing when we're discussing abortion. You know, the main thing is we're talking about marginalization, dehumanization. Right. You know, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about actual, real human rights. You know, that belong across the board. Right. You know, we know that inherently, and we know that because God's law tells us that. Yeah. You know, we know that in God's word. We have to keep that focus. Yes. When you don't keep that focus, you get off topic. You go on tangents, and it's all so bringing it back to this is good. You know, remembering SLED, bring it back to SLED. Yeah. And that's what I want to make a point too, to say that you know, for those who want to start off in this ministry, pro-life ministry, or even when you're defining life in general, memorize SLED, and also just memorize some arguments against bodily autonomy, which it's not as intimidating as it sounds. Once you see how inconsistent that is, it'll be easy. When you deal with the emotionally charged arguments, it may not be easy because it's all full of emotion. But when it comes down to logic and reasoning, these things are powerful in that area. So one thing that I want to close with is you know, so you guys have been doing this Arks of Bulrushes. It's been going on for now like a year now at least, right? Or almost a year. Almost a year. And early on, I remember hearing stories of you know, people actually changing their minds. So do you mind sharing a couple stories where God used Arks of Bulrushes, this ministry of yours, to save babies and to point mothers to the gospel? Here locally, I've been going to the mill here since 2017, and definitely in that time when I've seen a few people turn away, and since we started Arks, we've seen people turn away. We haven't necessarily been blessed with the opportunity to minister to someone necessarily after they've turned away yet. Right. And we're still praying and hoping for that opportunity. We've seen people turn away. We've seen people leave.
Isn't that crazy to think about, man? Is that like probably right now there's a baby walking around right now. Yeah, because you guys are out there, you know, and God used that, you know, and that's gonna be a story for that mother to. I mean, she might not want to share with the baby, like, yeah, I was gonna abort you, and, right. But maybe it's gonna be in our conscience, the message that you shared with them, you know, and. So yeah, I mean, there's been a couple times where God used you guys to save babies. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, you know, in our work, you know, what we do with Arks too. I mean, our work's not just out on the sidewalks. You know, we go to college campuses. We've gone to parks. We're going to go to the Lion's Den in a couple of weeks and go to the Women's March. So we go to places like this, though, because we get out there and we get our information out. When we went to, you know, our local university back in November, we went out there with, I believe, 200 tracts, and they were gone in half an hour. Oh, man. You know what I mean? Yeah. So we're getting the information out. You never know. I mean, so you're talking about even people have turned away, you know what I mean? Yeah. I mean, I would say probably the majority of people that have been affected by an abortion ministry and have turned away, the abortion ministry probably never even knew happened, right? And so it's gonna, you know, you never know where you're gonna affect somebody. When we go out to these college campuses, you know, we may have planted a seed, and you know, at that time, it may have been someone pregnant that had been thinking about it, you know what I mean, or someone that gets pregnant in the future and remembers the information they got, or we run into people sometimes that have told us, you know, well, I'm taking this information because I want to share it with somebody that I know that's going through, you know, this. Right. You know, and that's that awesome. Happens, you know, and we've been told multiple times, you know, we've been told by people that have gone in to the abortion mill that weren't there, say, for an abortion, but they've told us, I'm really glad you guys are out here. I'm very supportive that you guys are out here. And they said, we've been told by people like, I've had an abortion, or I had a friend that had an abortion, and I wish that someone would have been here for them, because I think that it would have helped. You know what I mean? Yeah. And I mean, you just don't know where you're gonna affect them. But like I said, we have seen people turn away and leave. We haven't been blessed with the opportunity to necessarily, like I said, care for that person beyond that, because we haven't. We give them our contact information. We just haven't been contacted. But but that's one of those things too. Why when we're out there and we're keeping ourselves gospel centered and stuff, right? Just like we talked about, we're that's in God's hands, and we trust in God's sovereignty. That His will is going to be done in that we don't have to see everybody that turns away. Right. We're not out there for that. We're not out there. We don't collect numbers. We're not like, well, we saved 25 people. Right. I'm not saying that numbers are a bad thing. I mean, some people know those. And it's awesome when you hear things like, like John Barros's ministry over in Florida. Thousands. Yeah. He's above, I think, 2,000 or something babies that have been saved, that's great, that's what they're aware of, right? Yeah, that's what I mean, and that's incredible. Yeah. But the real work is going out there and following what we're commanded to do. That's the work. That's success. Yes, is getting out there. Yeah.
And just some final thoughts on those who had abortion, and I've done this so many times where I speak so harshly against abortion, where I don't realize that someone there actually had an abortion, and they feel like I'm attacking them personally, and I'm like, look, if abortion isn't the unpardonable sin. Christ died for our sin, and if you had an abortion, there is hope for you. Mm-hmm. And if you're going through depression or emotional issues, there are counselors just for that. There are people you can talk to just for that issue that you're experiencing. For those of you who did listen to this discussion, if you either participated by taking someone to the abortion clinic, or if you had an abortion yourself, know that there is hope in Christ, and that His blood could cleanse you, and if it hasn't already, so cling to Christ. Not only that though, but don't stop there. Let people know how you feel and how much it damaged you after having an abortion, because a lot of women don't want to think about that. They go there, and then once they leave, they know something's wrong, and they have to experience that for years and years and years. And I know that's not with every single person that has an abortion, but it is a reality, and it's a common one, unfortunately. And we also want to be there for those who did that, So, man, Nick, thank you so much, bro. I really appreciate this. And for those who don't know, Nick was one of the earlier Saint Sanctified supporters. Back when you were on Facebook a lot, you would constantly post my little memes that I would make. So I appreciate that. And and yeah, so it's a privilege to have this discussion with you, bro. Yeah, man. I hope this interview was helpful. Is there anything you want to say? Anything else you want to plug in?
Yeah, sure. Just to kind of cover some things, like it's an intimidating ministry, like for sure. I'll let you know that when you go out there and you talk to people, do your studying, of course, and all that. But when you actually get out there and you discuss and you're talking to people, things kind of they have a natural way of just working, right? I mean, progressing, like conversations and stuff. These arguments, like we covered here, like I'll tell you, it's a lot harder for me to put into words and to go through this and describe how to go against these arguments than it is for someone to just walk up to me with one of these arguments. Yeah. Because it's like when someone walks up to me with one of these arguments, it's like just instinct kicks in, right? And you know what you're saying. But then if someone says like we did, someone says, well, how do you do it? And they try to explain, and it's like, it might sound, confusing, but something with that is probably like, watch people that do this, watch the videos and you'll see, that's very helpful to do for sure. Yeah. And get involved, like, find something in your town, your city. Of course, not every city has an abortion mill, but Bakersfield has 2. Right. Not every city has them, even Bakersfield, we have the 2, but it's the only 2 within like a 90-mile radius. Right. But there's still ways to be involved, even besides that. There's still school campuses, there's still something that you can do and be involved in, because just because something's not nearby, it doesn't mean somebody's not going to be affected by this. So there's always ways to get involved, but find something. See if there's a group that's out there already. Because even if you end up not being part of that group, you can at least go and kind of glean from them, experience and stuff like that. It's kind of what I did getting into this at first. And if you find there's nothing and you got to start something, again, just go out there and do it. It's, I mean, you've got everything on your side when it comes to the arguments, and be committed to the commands that were given, obey the gospel, go out there and preach it, give that. If anything, you don't have, even if you don't have to have an argument for everything, or even if you don't go out there necessarily to argue something, go out there and preach the gospel at the facility or to anybody that will hear. If you go do that, let your church know what you're doing. Go to your elders, talk to them, let them know what you're doing, let them know. You want to keep that. You want them to know what you're doing. You want to keep, and you want them. You want that accountability in your life. You want their shepherding. You want to be able to go to them and say, hey, if I'm stepping out of line somewhere, please you tell me and let me know, because I'm trusting you as shepherding.
And not that, but they also may want to support you.
And they may want to support you, absolutely.
Maybe they might want to contribute a little bit, to funds for signs or even tracks, and all that. Because all that costs. It's going to cost you.
It all costs. Yeah.
And so yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's how, and then that's how you find people.
Yeah.
I mean, the paths that have crossed for Arks of Bulrushes to work and to have people are amazing.
Yeah.
And all providential, through God's hand. We've crossed paths. Like there's some very strange ways that our paths have crossed. Mm-hmm. And actually one of the help found Arks of Bulrushes. Mm-hmm. It's not even our paths crossed when we happened to be both watching a live Facebook video of Apologia and Jeff Durbin, probably it was at that time, out in front of an abortion mill in Arizona preaching. Yeah. And I wrote a comment on the live Facebook feed saying, man, I wish, this is what it was like at Bakersfield.
Oh, nice.
And then I get a message below that and says, you're in Bakersfield? I'm in Bakersfield.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, oh, wow, well, that's cool. As incredible as it is, like the next question, so we, we're like, oh yeah, well, I'm into this. The next thing I said is, okay, well, what church do you go to? And I put Sovereign Grace. And then this person puts, so do I. I was like, you gotta be kidding me. I mean, it was, and then like the next Sunday, I'm like, all right, well, look for me. I'll be like wearing this. So we like meet up.
Oh, nice.
And the next thing we're both out at the abortion mill doing the work. And then, fast forward a year and a half later, and we're starting Arks of Bulrushes, and
yeah, it is. Like you said earlier, it's kind of weird how we kind of somehow got in God's providence, through Facebook or mutual friends, brought us together. So
yeah, even with Ben and Maurice, similar thing. Like when I started going in 2017, when I first started going, I met with one of our elders.
Yeah. Nice.
For like breakfast, and I said, I just want to meet because I want to tell you what I'm doing. I'm not meeting to say like, hey, you guys should start a ministry. Like I said that's not why I want to meet. I want to meet so that you guys know what I'm doing, just like I was talking about. You know, you're my elders. I don't. I want you to be unaware of what I'm out there doing. When it comes to this kind of stuff.
Which is good, man.
And this is, and then you go 2 years later, and I suddenly get a text message from Ben and Maurice, and they're like, hey, you don't know us, I think. And I mean, this is when they'd first, pretty soon after they'd first moved here, right?
Right.
And they're like, hey, you don't know us, but we talked to, John, one of our elders, and we were talking to him, and we mentioned that, we were interested in doing abortion ministry work. And they said, John gave us your number. I was like, wow, that's incredible, because I really hadn't been like I didn't talk to the elders a lot about what I was doing. I just told them what I was doing, but it wasn't like, we weren't like regular discussions about it or anything.
Right.
But they remembered, they knew first thing to do was, hey, tell them to call Nick. It was pretty cool. I mean, dude, awesome.
I think we're starting to see finally the need to have gospel-centered pro-life ministries. Mm-hmm. And Arks is one of those ministries, and it's a privilege to be part of it, and it's a blessing, man. So yeah, hopefully people are encouraged by this discussion, bro. Mm-hmm. Man, we can keep talking.
We can
keep talking.
Let me just throw out there though.
Yeah, go for it.
If you're interested in starting something up, talk to the guys at Apologia or End Abortion Now. They're very open about talking. They'll share resources with you and everything. If you're anywhere near Bakersfield, like get a hold of us for sure. Go on our Facebook page, Arks of Bulrushes, on Facebook.
I'll make sure to link it.
Email us, arksofbulrushes@gmail.com. Let us know you're here, that you're interested. And, I mean, we'd love to have you. One thing we constantly pray for and are always in need for is more people.
Yes.
We want more people to be out there, more bodies. We know they're out there. Right now we're kind of like we're spread across 2 very small churches in town. You know what I mean? And there's so many more Christians in this city. And that there's more that would be involved. And so we want that word out there for sure. Yeah. So just let us know, and you don't have to be ready to go out there with us. You know what I mean? Go out there and hold a sign. Yeah, and just watch and listen and see what we do.
That's basically what I do a lot. I go there and I try to hand out little tracts and still trying to make my way to use the cone. I'm still pretty nervous about that. But no, it's a blessing, man. And not only that, but because it's wise that you guys don't go out if you have less than 3 people. And so there are times where you have to cancel because no one can make it out. Unfortunately, people are out of town or they're sick or whatever. So if you're around, either message me through Saints Edified or go to Arks of Bulrushes or email arksofbulrushes@gmail.com, right?
Yeah.
So check them out. All right, Nick. If I don't hit stop on this thing, we'll keep talking, bro.
Oh man, yeah.
All right, bro. Well, I appreciate it, man. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.